Thank you, Maurice. I'd like to invite our Scientist of the Year, Dr. Naomi Rose.
I'm going to give a short presentation. Maral asked me to discuss sort of the most recent developments in the U.S. and on the captive display of whales and dolphins. So this is just sort of a rundown, a brief review of issues that are sort of hot topics right now. I did actually originally in this presentation, I covered all of basically the whole world. There are things going on in Europe, in China, in Russia, but for this talk, I'm just going to focus on the U.S. As you all know, Lolita, who is in Miami, was included in the listing for the southern resident killer whales, so she is now considered part of an endangered species. That is not going to change her situation overnight. I think that's the main take-home message I want everybody to understand. It's going to take a while, and probably at least a couple of lawsuits by we citizens. We are going to have to force the government to do the right thing, because I guarantee you they're not going to do it without some encouragement from us. The nice thing and the different thing, just so you understand why this is such a huge development, prior to this, the only law that was protecting Lolita and all the other captive whales and dolphins in captivity was the Animal Welfare Act. And the Animal Welfare Act does not have any provisions in it that automatically grant citizens standing to file suit against the government when they're not doing the right thing, when they're not enforcing that law. We do not have automatic standing, and it is extremely difficult to get standing under the Animal Welfare Act to sue on behalf of the animals the law protects. That might seem sort of absurd to you, but unfortunately, remember this law was written in 1966, and unfortunately that's just the case. It is extremely difficult to sue, for example, the government for failing to protect Lolita. We cannot represent her in court. And so the ESA was written 7 years after the Animal Welfare Act in 1973, and for whatever prescient reason, the lawmakers actually wrote in a provision that is called the citizen suit provision. We automatically have standing under the ESA to sue on behalf of the animals it protects. And that is the big difference now that Lolita is protected under the ESA. We automatically have standing to bring a lawsuit against the government if they don't do the right thing. Now, there are still all these sort of deadlines and hoops that we have to jump through to bring this suit, and we have to make sure that we give the government every chance to do the right thing, but they're not going to. I can just tell you right now, what they want to do is leave her where she is. And so what we need to do is make it clear to a court that that is not allowed under the Endangered Species Act, that this is not adequate to protect her, right? So there are 2 states right now that are considering bills that would prohibit the public display of orcas in the case of California, or all cetaceans in the case of Washington State. The bill in California, just you know, it is currently in stasis. It's in limbo. It's not dead, but we have a difficult chair, well, I should say, sorry, a difficult speaker of the Assembly in California right now. She represents a district in San Diego that has SeaWorld. Okay, so SeaWorld is her constituent, and she's the Speaker of the Assembly. And just as in Congress, at the federal level, the Speaker of the Assembly has a great deal of power. And she is basically not allowing a hearing on the bill. So it is still an interim study, but there should be a hearing on the interim study. That's part of the process in California, and it's not happening. So we are, of course, writing to her right now saying, please allow a hearing, but it's highly likely that we're simply going to have to wait her term out. Fortunately, the speaker's only our speaker for 2 years, and she's not going to run again, and so in 2016, her term will expire, and Assemblyman Richard Bloom is still completely committed to this bill, and so this is all politics, unfortunately. In Washington, the bill, which is what this screen capture is about, was introduced because one citizen approached a state senator that she knew, and asked him if he would do something like this, and he thought it was a great idea. This is, some of you know of Anna Gullickson. She is a pilot for a seaplane airline in Washington State, and the senator was one of her regular customers because his district requires him to fly home. And so she just started chatting to him about this. She had a plan. I mean, she was very, very careful about this. And basically, he agreed with her. He introduced the Senate bill, which didn't get out of committee, and so it went to the House. And it was a companion bill, so that's HB 2115. Now, that bill did get out of committee, but it's currently being held in rules, and it's hard, and I don't know what that means. I don't understand the Washington legislature, but apparently it's not going to come out of rules this year. So again, don't be disappointed. These things take time. We're in the middle of a paradigm shift, and nothing happens quickly. So what we'll do is we will regroup in Washington as in California, and this bill will almost certainly be reintroduced next year. But we need to regroup on that. So you might hear in the media or whatever that it died, but these bills never die. As long as we're here to support them, they will be resurrected. So, as you also may know, there was a lawsuit filed by the Georgia Aquarium to overturn the astounding decision by the National Marine Fisheries Service to deny them a permit to import 18 belugas that were caught in Russia. The fact that the National Marine Fisheries Service denied this permit was also a sign of the times. It was an enormous shift in the zeitgeist, and I don't think I can understate how amazing it was. It was the first time that agency had ever denied a public display permit, and it was because politically, for the first time, they felt safe in doing it. It was the right thing to do, don't get me wrong, but there were many other permits that they issued in the past that were the wrong thing to do, but they felt that if they had denied those permits, they would have not survived a lawsuit by the industry. This time, clearly, they felt secure in their decision that they would survive a lawsuit by the industry, but the lawsuit came. So the Georgia Aquarium has filed a lawsuit against the National Marine Fisheries Service to overturn this denial. They have filed their merits brief, in other words, their brief that argues why, on the merits, the court should overturn the decision of the agency. And we being obviously the government, who's the defendant, but we are 4 or 5, I can't remember now, NGOs that have been granted intervenor status. So we are actually co-defendants now with the government. And so we have also been granted the right to argue in court, just as the government can. And so we have prepared our brief in reply to the Georgia Aquarium's brief, and that is due on Monday. And I also want to give a shout out to some folks who are filing an amicus curiae brief, which some of you may know what that is. It's a friend of the court. You do have to get leave to do so, but generally speaking, courts are welcoming of such amicus briefs. They like to get additional information that might not be something that the defendants themselves might provide. And we have an excellent group of folks who have gotten together, and Luis Hoyos is one of them. He signed on to the amicus brief, so did Gabriella Carpethwaite, so has Sylvia Earle, so has Jean-Michel Cousteau, so is Jane Goodall. All right, so we also have some Hollywood celebrities sprinkled in there for some jazzing it up to make it more media friendly. We have Edward Norton, we have Shannon Doherty. These are people who have agreed to put their names onto a brief that's being written by a lawyer that puts in a little bit of stuff that we couldn't put in ourselves as co-defendants, or the government couldn't put in, because we were restricted to the record, what the government had in front of it at the time it made its decision. The amicus, the amici as they're called, they can bring in things that are slightly outside the box that we cannot discuss. And so we've done that through a pro bono attorney who's just been very dedicated to this, and the actual amici who've signed on to it, including Louis. So that's Monday, by the way. We file all of those briefs on Monday. Do not expect a quick decision. These things, the cogs of the wheels of justice turn slowly. My guess is it'll take her, the judge is a woman, that it'll take her 6 to 9 months to make a ruling. But at some point, and I'll tell you what the ruling will be, she's going to agree with the government. All right, the Georgia Aquarium's going to lose, and they're going to lose badly. And if I'm wrong, you can all shoot me down, but I'm laying my reputation on the line to tell you that, because I've read their brief, and it's terrible. And she is not stupid. I've seen her in court. I've was there when she made when she heard the arguments for a more administrative issue related to this case, and she's a very smart woman, and I don't think she's going to buy for 1 minute the absolute BS that is in the Georgia Aquarium's merits brief. So, as you all know, SeaWorld, of course, now a publicly owned company, and they keep having to make these, what must be for them, agonizing financial reports. So the most recent financial report was for the final quarter of 2014, and it was just more bad news. So they haven't had a good quarterly report since at least August of 2014, which is when their stock dropped 30%. It's recovered a little bit, but it's fluctuating around $18, $19. This is from a high of 39. So it's a very serious problem they have. They're deeply in debt, despite the fact that they're making this proposal to do the Blue World project, which will cost $100 million for each park. I'm not sure where they're supposed to get that money. It's just it's incredibly illogical to me that they're making this proposal given their current financial picture. So I'm not a business person, but I do know what debt is, and I do know what $100 million is, $300 million when you talk about all three parks, and I don't see the math. So it'll be interesting to see what they actually do with that. But anyway, they are not doing well financially, and you can read any financial analysis, The Motley Fool, other Wall Street Journal, and they're saying that there's a problem here for SeaWorld. And then with Ringling Brothers' recent decision, it just makes it seem like they're more sort of out in left field. A lot of companies are cutting their ties with SeaWorld. The Miami Dolphins are basically one of the most recent, but Southwest Airlines, Virgin Atlantic, and other smaller companies are just one by one stepping back. And I think that this is something that you need to see in terms of the shifting paradigm. Society, this is how it happens. Especially in a capitalist society, cutting corporate ties is a very clear sign about what's happening. So I think that this alone, as well as the stock falling, are the sure signs that we're looking at something that's mainstream, it's corporate, it's capitalist. It's not us, it's not animal rights, it's not activists, it's it's money, yeah. It's what makes our world turn. And so I think more than anything, the fact that SeaWorld continues to call its critics extremists and radicals, it's really starting to ring hollow to everybody. I mean, I don't think I'm being optimistic by saying that. I don't think of myself as an optimist. I think of myself as a realist, and I don't think I'm being optimistic by, reading the tea leaves that way. They're really starting to sound kind of absurd when they keep saying that. There are a growing number of proposals to build sanctuaries and to retire currently captive whales and dolphins to them. Many of you may know about the proposal in Europe. There's two, actually, in Europe that are both very viable. One is by Merlin Entertainment, which is actually a subsidiary of Blackstone, who also used to own most of the stock in SeaWorld and now is a minority owner of stock in SeaWorld. So it's all very strange, the way capitalism and the strange bedfellows that they have. But anyway, Merlin is very serious about building a sanctuary in Europe to house 5 dolphins that they've acquired by buying up a theme park here or a theme park there that happen to have a dolphinarium in it. They don't want the dolphinariums, and they don't just want to sell the dolphins to another dolphinarium, and I give them a lot of credit for that. This is taking a lot of time, which is upsetting a lot of people, but none know very well, and he's a wonderful man. Proposal here in the United States that the I did watch. I stayed there long enough to see what. Nobody knows why they did this. They're not going You're just a bunch of strangers. That captures whales or dolphins from the wild. Later, but it is